Okay, so I'm making this to show you how I do an information meeting, roughly. It helps to get ideas. There is a skeleton, a kind of an outline of what they really want you to cover at info meetings, and I'm sure you guys have seen that. And this is one of the things you have to do as a director, so I thought you might want to see how I do it. You start off by introducing yourself a little bit, but mostly asking questions of the people there, how many kids they have, how long they've been homeschooling, what they know about classical education, and what they know about classical conversations. And you do this because you want to be able to direct the, the meeting in a way that suits them best. And so then you tell them about yourself and how long you've been in the program, and just maybe why you're homeschooling. And then they say you pass around a sign-in sheet. I don't do that because usually it's just one or two people, so just make sure you get their information. And then you can start off with a prayer. So I want to start by just giving an overview of classical conversations. Our mission is to know God and make Him known, but this is a bit of a broader statement that I really like to read. We believe that education finds its purpose and culmination in knowing God and making Him known. We believe that parents are the primary educators of their children, therefore we invest heavily in equipping parents with the tools of learning based on a biblical worldview in order to impact the world for God's glory. So we want to fully integrate Christianity into the school experience. This program does go from 4 years old through high school, all the way to the end. All the kids are learning the same thing, so up until through age 11. So this may not seem like a big deal if you're just starting out or only have one child, but when you have more than one, it really is helpful. For instance, I have 5, and doing 5 curriculums would have been impossible. So by the time they're 12, yes, in Challenge, which is middle school, they do have a totally different curriculum, and it's very time-consuming and demanding, but they're working towards independence the whole time, closer and closer to independence. By 10th or 11th grade, you're just pretty much helping them stay on track, making sure they're on track. And you can move. There's so many communities all over the country that if you move, you can just jump right into the same cycle you're in. And if there's not a community, you can start one. So the classical and classical conversations, to many people when you say classical education, they think it means using a timeline, teaching Latin, reading a lot of literature, and we do those things, but for us the classical is referring to the trivium model of education, which is over 2,000 years old at least. It was used in ancient Greece, and trivium is just Latin for 3 roads. And it refers to the 3 stages of learning that we use. So a lot of classical schools and classical conversations like to point to a lecture given by Dorothy Sayers in the 1940s, which was called The Lost Tools of Learning. And it was in the 40s, like I said, and she was talking about how people are no longer taught how to think. So more people are educated than ever before, but they are more also easily persuaded because thinking is not taught. Or the way she put it was how to learn. So we have a society who has not learned how to think or process or defend ideas. She said that was a real shame. So this was in the 40s before television and the internet and all that, so you can imagine it is even more the case now. But she talks about these tools of learning, and she says they're the same for any and every subject, and the person who knows how to use them will at any age get the mastery of a new subject in half the time and with a quarter of the effort expended by the person who has not the tools at his command. So it's not just learning subjects, but learning how to learn. And so the trivium, like I said, is the 3 stages of learning, and it's actually the way we learn anything. But it also happens to coincide with a child's development as they grow. So I like to show this chart. The trivium has grammar, dialectic, and rhetoric. So we'll go into those a little bit. But of course, if this is how we learn, then it is created by God. And in the Bible, the grammar would equate to knowledge, dialectic, understanding, and rhetoric is wisdom. So, let's see. If you think of it like a computer, the grammar would be the input, or data, raw data. The dialectic would be the processing, putting everything together, and the rhetoric would be the output. So that's helpful. Since it is how we learn anything, if you want to ask the people there about maybe a hobby they have that you don't know anything about, then ask them some basic grammar about it. You could see how that would work. I like to use basketball as an example. So you can't just start playing basketball. If somebody says dribble the ball and you don't know what dribble means, then you can't dribble. If you don't know where the three-point shot is from on the court, then you can't make a three-pointer. So you have to learn the grammar. And grammar means just the vocabulary of any subject. We always think of English grammar, but this is not the same. It's come to mean that more to us, but it used to be grammar schools. People knew that grammar just meant the basics, the vocabulary of subjects. So, grammar stage is the knowledge of basic facts. Younger children, ages 4 to 11, from age about 4 to 11, they love memorizing, learning facts. They're wired at especially very young ages to enjoy repetition. They have a natural affinity for storing up large amounts of information. You know that if you've ever had a child with a favorite book, favorite nursery rhyme, they just easily recall and remember things. So this stage, Susan Weisbauer in The Well-Trained Mind calls the pegs, hammering in the pegs in your brain to hang things on later. So you have the spot there to add to later. So Lee Borton's the founder, says you can get a middle schooler to memorize their periodic tables, but they're not going to want to do it. But if you put it to a song, a 4-year-old will have no problem doing that. They'll think it's fun. So the next stage, that's the grammar stage, is the dialectic. And this stage is also called the logic stage. It is understanding or processing, putting the facts together, and the way this stage is taught is a lot of questioning and answers. Clarifying and refining thoughts. So a preteen or early teen, they will have all these facts they've learned, but they start questioning them, and they're putting together what they've learned and saying, well, I don't know if I believe that. So they have the tendency to argue a lot. Discussion is a great way to teach them. In this program, Essentials is the bridge to the dialectic stage, and we'll get to that. But in the middle school years and early high school, they teach them debate and how to argue respectfully, and also they teach logic so they can have clear thoughts, and they want to teach them not to fall prey to the words of others. So the logic is really important there. They recognize if an argument someone is making is actually directed toward an attack on the person instead of what they're actually saying. So it's a really great way to teach that. Then the last stage is rhetoric, which is actually what it means. What it meant in classical Greek times is persuade, and that is what it means. And we want to persuade of truth. And so I think back then they just wanted to persuade. So they learn to express themselves, create. They know something well enough to teach it. Back to the basketball reference, the dialectic would be practicing or playing the game. When you get to the rhetorical stage, it would be you are able to coach, teach someone how to play basketball, or create your own plays, or coach. They have done a lot of presenting by this time. This is the older high school grades. They do a lot of even leading the seminars in class. And they've had so much practice with presenting that they are ready for whatever God has for their lives. So, a little about the founder. Lee Bortons is an astrophysicist, and she quit working to homeschool her kids. And she had 2 boys in middle school and was reading a lot about classical education, and realized that while she and her family were reading the classics and reading the Founding Fathers and Shakespeare, they could read the words but didn't really understand what they were reading. So she decided to go back to the basics of English grammar and start trying to give them a more classical education in general. So she started in her home having middle schoolers and their parents meet, and realized that the accountability really helped, and she was getting a lot more done. But by the end of her first year, she had a waiting list of 300. So she figured out a way to make this available to lots of people and started Classical Conversations, and now there's 80,000 students all over the country. So it's really grown. Every year it just grows exponentially. So now I'll talk about the programs we have. I like this chart, and it kind of coincides with the other one, but we start with foundations, definitely the grammar stage, a lot of memorization, essentials, and then challenge. So let's talk about foundations. I'm going to show the foundations guide. This is your curriculum for all 3 cycles. We go in 3 cycles at a time, and next year will be cycle 1. You can jump in at any time, but I might show page, I should have this dog-eared beforehand. Okay, page 17 talks about the cycles and what you learn. So you could show this, or you could say in cycle 1 we're going to study ancient world history, ancient geography, through modern, different empires, earth science, biology, our timeline. We're going to study Old Masters, verbs and prepositions, noun endings in Latin, and you know, it's all right here. So if they have a catalog already, you can tell them to turn to page 17. Many people recommend waiting to give the catalog out because they'll be looking at it and not paying attention to you. So that's, you could see which way you like best. But I would pass it out when you start to talk about challenge. So when the child is 4 to 11, we start each day with a community assembly, and the director will give announcements, and we'll work on scripture memory, and we'll have a family presentation, which helps us to get to know each other better as a community, and helps the families work on giving group presentations. We meet 12 times before Christmas and 12 times after Christmas, and after assembly the kids will break up into their classes with their tutors, and the classes are no more than 8 children, and they are grouped roughly by age. There are 5 30-minute segments, so it's 2.5 hours, and these segments are new grammar, and I'll start with this one. So this, we're going to spend 30 minutes working on the new grammar, and like I said, it's just the vocabulary of the subject, so we're not talking about English grammar only here. But here's the new grammar. We do a timeline, we do history, sentence, we do math, science, geography, and Latin. And I am going to have my timeline cards out at a information meeting. So I'd say these are the timeline cards. You don't have to buy these, but this is one of the things that I would recommend buying. You definitely need this book and a tin whistle, but that's all you really have to have. So the timeline cards, you could show how on the back they all show where in the world something happened. And then I would definitely show the page in your foundations guide that has the entire, I'm just going to dog-ear this right now because I'm about to have a meeting, that shows all of the timeline. So all 23 weeks, 161 timeline events, and it's really neat. And then you can say every history sentence we have fits into the timeline. Now, cycle 1, week 1 is the 10 Commandments, but if you go to say cycle 1, week 14 is about the Songhai, and it's in our timeline. So they really work hard to make sure the history sentences are in the timeline, and that's really neat. And then math is the same every year, the science facts we learn, and you could also have it open to one of the weeks. So when you're talking about this, you can explain that. For geography, I would show, let's say we do a lot of tracing. I would show this. So the kids are working on drawing, you know, and when they're 12, they're going to draw the world map. So, you know, talk about how we trace a lot and that there is a purpose behind that. And then Latin. Do Latin memory work. You could show that on the week, and the Latin is all seen again and challenged, so it's not just memorized for no reason. It is so critical when they get to challenge, and if a child jumps into challenge without it, they recommend they go back and learn the Latin from cycle 1, 2, and 3, or especially cycle 1 and 2. And then an English fact. We're learning the prepositions this year. So those are the new grammar. We pack all that into 30 minutes, so it's a lot. But this is the first time the parent gets introduced to this, is when they come to Community Day and they spend the entire week reviewing it. And I would recommend 25 to 30 minutes a day. And you can show them this. The CDs are great in the car, and that totally counts as review because they can learn a lot driving around in the car. A lot of the memory work is to song. And that would be an important thing to mention also. The timeline has a song. All the history sentences have a song. All the math facts have a song. And sorry, they are on a CD. And the other ways we teach are movement and visual and you know, hand motions. We try and hit all of the different learning styles. Songs are a big part of it, but we try and hit different learning styles for everyone. Then the science experiment is, these three might be out of order, it's depending on the day, but we do maybe one, sometimes two science experiments, and they are usually correlated with the science facts that we learned in new grammar. And you never have to bring anything to class. It's all provided in your supply fee. And then we do fine arts. So you could show them the Drawing with Children book if you have it, or just say that the first 6 weeks we work on drawing skills using the methods in Drawing with Children. We don't do this just as enrichment or extra, but because everyone needs the skill of drawing. Everyone needs a basic skill of drawing, and they will need that when they draw maps. It's just something everyone should be able to do. The second 6 weeks we do tin whistle, and that is music theory, and they learn to play this instrument, and they learn the notes on a scale. And then after Christmas, the third 6 weeks, we do Great Artists. We can show that book. And we pick 6 artists a year, and they do a project or a painting in the style of that artist, or that makes you think of the artist's word. And then the last 6 weeks is classical music, where they study at least 3 composers every year. And all of this, the artists and composers, they will see again when they get into high school. Then the next one is presentation. So this is 30 minutes, 30 minutes, 30 minutes, 30 minutes of presentations where everyone gets up in front of the class and does their presentation. So the director will provide a schedule of presentation topics, some for older kids, some for younger kids, and it's always up to the parent if you want to use those. They are just suggested. But some kids have a really hard time with the presentations, but they all eventually get better at it. By at least the second year, they have are doing way better. And when they're 4 years old, this is more like show and tell. Like, this is my favorite doll, or this is my favorite comic book. Just getting up there is really great. But by the time they're 10 or 11, they need to be putting a lot more thought and effort. We teach skills such as not saying not fidgeting, looking at your audience, poise, all these different things are taught, and they should really put more effort into it. And they may have a topic like read a famous speech, or memorize something and read it, or tell us about a famous person, and sometimes they'll even dress up. So it's a bigger deal as they get older. And during Challenge, middle school and high school is called Challenge, they have to present every time they meet, and it gets harder. It's not as much of it's not a recommendation, of course. They're presenting their papers or their science projects every week, at least 1 or 2 presentations. So then we do review games, and that's 30 minutes of review of the previous 6 weeks. And this is a great time for them to learn it even more, or show that they've been working on it at home. Depending on the class, this may or may not be a competitive time. And the review does something that we're really trying to work on with having the cycles that repeat, and with reviewing the previous weeks, is long-term memory. So in modern education, and what you may have gone through, they do a cram and dump. So you cram, you take the test, and then you forget it. So we're trying to get it in their long-term memory instead of just short-term. So the 3 ways you learn things are repetition, intensity, and duration. And so we're working on the repetition when we teach it, and then the duration by repeating. And hopefully they're getting a lot of repeating at home. Like I said, about 25 minutes a day is totally great, I think. So the next one, and you can show some of this other stuff like the maps, but it's important for them to know you just need the Foundations guide. So, and I think it's $60. The next one is Essentials. So as you can see, these overlap. So if you go to Foundations from 9:30 to noon, and you're ages 9 to 11, you'll go to Essentials from 1 to 3 in the afternoon, after lunch. And we all eat lunch as a community. It's a nice time to fellowship and for the kids to play. And Essentials is Essentials of the English Language. It is the first 45 minutes are English grammar, which is diagramming sentences, parsing sentences, and then, let me see, you could show, if you have it, this giant book. It's really big, and it's organized week by week for you. And you go to class, and the tutor presents that week of material, and then you go home and you work on it. And it's spelled out very clearly for you. And this is kids, they're getting a little older, they're closer to the dialectic stage. It's a great transition to the dialectic stage. They enjoy being with their friends, they're enjoy collaborating, they're a little bit competitive. It's a really fun class. So the first 45 minutes is English grammar. The next portion is 30 minutes of math games, which is when you work on keeping math problems in your head. And then the last 45 minutes is Institute for Excellence in Writing. So they're going to write a paper every week, and they'll present it, and then we'll talk about the writing assignment. They never sit there and write. It's not wasted time. It's 45 minutes, so it's very active time. And IEW is a wonderful program for parents because it helps them know exactly how to teach writing and quantify it and make it not subjective. And it's great for the kids because it helps them write great stuff right off the bat. And it doesn't start with creative, but mechanics, analyzing themes, a lot of outlining, and it's just a really great program. The cycles in Foundations, like I was saying, we start Cycle 1 next year, which is Ancient. So this was last year. U.S. history-based writing lessons. So next year we're going to use ancient history to learn writing. So all of our papers will be about ancient history. So that's a great way that it correlates, and IEW makes that for us. So the next stage is Challenge 12 to 18 or 19, whatever the case may be. And this is the middle school and high school. The parents don't attend, and I may not have talked about how the parents have to attend in Foundations. If you don't know anything about CC, then you wouldn't know that. So that's really important, that the tutor is there for the parent to help them with ideas on how to present it during the week. So I may have missed that. Challenge is 12 or less students in a class with one trained tutor from 8:30 to 3 o'clock. So it is a full day. And it's different in that instead of coming to class and getting the thing they're going to be learning that week presented, they have done all their work for the week. They have a, let me show you. This is a guide, a challenge guide, and it tells them week by week what they need to work on, what they need to read, so that they can come to class prepared, because the biggest thing about challenge is that it's discussion, and as homeschoolers we're not going to have discussion with peers unless they're family members. So at this point you would definitely want to have your catalog out, because if you haven't been through challenge, there's so much to it and we don't want to sell it short. Now you can always recommend, if they have a child close to the age or they want to know more, Melissa and I are having 2 more challenge meetings, and that would be great to direct them towards. So on page 21 is the scope and sequence. And a big thing about challenge in all of CC, but it really starts coming to the forefront in challenge, is integration of subjects. So God is at the center of learning, and so therefore there are no independent subjects, so we want to really think about integration of subjects. And so when I visited a challenge class once, they had a bell that they rang anytime they could integrate subjects, because so many of us didn't learn that way and it doesn't always come naturally. But and this could be a time when you would throw in those circles that say modern education has everything in its separate circles. Christian education has a separate circle for God. Good Christian education has God at the center. And then great Christian education has everything relating. So this would be a time when you could show that. You know, when they go to a regular middle school, they go to history class and then they go to English class, and the English teacher has no idea what they talked about in history, and especially with history and art and everything relates, and it's just such a much better education to integrate everything. So we want doctors that know about economics. We want politicians that know about history. You need to be well-rounded, and especially with God being at the center, and it does relate everything, because everything goes back to Him. So it will be exciting when you get in challenge to see how that all works. It's designed to be 3-year swings, so challenge A, you could call it 7th grade, 8th grade, challenge 1, 2, 3, and 4, 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th, they are designed to go in 3-year swings. So if somebody entered at age 14, they want to start with challenge A. I have heard you can skip 1 year of challenge, maybe even 2, and still get all the credits you need to graduate. Credits, transcripts are something people worry about, and CC helps with all that. It really is a support for that. They help keep your transcript, and then I think it costs $15 to get it at the end. That's academicrecords.net does that. What else? So, like I said earlier, they teach them a lot of debate. A lot of the kids do debate around town too, in debate clubs. So if you look at page 21, and you could also watch a window into challenge. It shows the different challenges, and it has strands, not subjects, because we don't want to call them subjects where they're unto themselves. They call it a strand. So grammar, that strand is where they learn their Latin. They do Henley Latin, and they do the same Latin for the first 3 years of challenge, so A, B, and 1. They're really trying to get a great foundation. So they add vocabulary, and they'll go a little farther each year, but they start back at the beginning every year. So in that way, it's like essentials, which I should have mentioned, is the exact same for 3 years in a row. And the idea is it's very thorough and in-depth, and you should just, the first year, consider a drive-by and you master a few things. The second year, you master maybe many things. And the third year, you should really have it. And that makes learning Latin way easier when you have a good knowledge of grammar. So, like I said, they use Henley Latin, and they use all the foundations memory work that they did comes back into play. The next strand is, and then they continue on with that to go to where in Challenge 3 they're reading Caesar and Cicero, and in Challenge 4 they're translating their own version of the Aeneid while they read another version of the Aeneid in Latin, so they get to see if they agree with the translator who is from the 1800s. So that's really neat. Then exposition and composition. In Challenge A they learn, they talk about literature and do a lot of discussion and persuasive writing about the characters in the literature. So if somebody's at the meeting and they're looking at Challenge A and the books that they read, they'll say, my kids already read those books and they're, only 10 years old. They do that for a reason. So they want them to be able to really think about the books and take it further. They don't want the book to be over their head and then them have to write a persuasive paper about a book that's over their head. And then the debate strand. In Challenge A, it's still a lot of grammar, so it is still a bridge in a way to the dialectic. There's a lot of memorization. So instead of the debate in Challenge A, they put geography there, and they memorize and are able to draw a map of the world. Challenge is very scaled according to the parent. Even though there is a tutor, the parent is still the primary teacher. So if you say, I just want my kid to learn the continents and how to draw them, if you know they have trouble with or a learning disability or anything like that, it's always scalable. Or if you want them to learn, I think the actual curriculum says physical features, capitals, mountain ranges or physical features, absolutely everything. And they've done amazing things with that. So in the back of your foundations guide is a map of the world that a challenge student has drawn, and I would definitely show that. So then the next strand, and when they're in Challenge B, they do a mock trial, which they get is really cool. They get evidence from a real trial. There's 3 different ones. I think one's a murder trial, one's domestic violence, and one a dog attacks somebody. And there's a prosecution and a defense, and they work on this, and then they present it in front of a real judge, and he rules on their case. So that's a great experience. And then the second semester of Challenge B, they debate current events. Let's see. Then the research strand is where they put all the science. In Challenge A, they do biology and natural science. In Challenge B, they talk about the history of science and origins. They also read books on World War II and Hitler. So they integrate the Darwinism and the Hitler and how it influenced his extermination of Jews. It's just really neat. So for biology and some of the other science strands, what they might do is if they're studying a certain aspect of biology, the kids will be able to pick something that interests them in that field, and then they do a paper on it with drawings, and that's what they present. So the kids are sitting in class listening to presentations on what interested the other kids, which most likely interests them too, and they learn a lot that way. The rhetoric, then they do chemistry. They end up with physics in Challenge 4. So the rhetoric strand is a lot of logic and formal logic. Let's see. They do Socratic dialogue. That's where you sit around and you ask a question, you define your terms, there's a lot of questioning is how you get the discussion going. So the tutor is not there to tell them right or wrong, but just kind of lead the discussion. Then for the logic, seems backwards, but they put the logic in rhetoric, and then the logic is the actual math. So one thing about the math is they do use Saxon math, and in the guide it'll say do this part of Saxon math, but the kids are always at different stages, different math curriculums, so that part they may not be doing. They may be doing a different math, and that's totally fine. They classically talk about math. So if you have a student that's lower, I think one way that they do it is they all bring in a math problem they're working on, and if you've got someone way advanced, they may teach it, so the kids will learn above their head, and then if they learn something below them, it's review. So it works out, but that's the one part that they may be doing separately. So challenge A, this is kind of interesting. Let's see, I think it's part of rhetoric. They read, "It couldn't just happen." So at age 12, they're talking about, and another book too, The Fallacy Detective, which is recognizing bad reasons. So this is their rhetoric for challenge A. And a lot of what they're talking about is evolution compared to creationism. And you'll have lots of different views on this, and even Christians believe things differently. And so the tutor is not going to say, "You're wrong," but they need to defend their stance. And I've heard that a lot of times what happens is some kids haven't really thought about how to back it up. They just thought this is what mom or dad said. So they'll go home and talk to their parents, and this helps them to really own what they believe instead of waiting till college to find out, oh, not everybody agrees with mom and dad. They'll hash through this stuff in a safe environment at a young age. And there's literature that some parents may not like that goes, throughout challenge. I think and you're always at liberty to say we're not going to read that, but I know that their argument would be there's basic truths men have always wrestled with, and a lot of the classic literature addresses this, and we want to see what they came up with, even if they're wrong. And we don't need to hide from things because we're on the right side of things with God. So I like that about it, and you're always the parent. So you can always opt out of anything. In challenge 4 in rhetoric, and this is all right here, so you can just read. If you have read through this, there's a place in the catalog that describes every single challenge level, and then a place that shows all of the materials. It's in a different place. So if you look at those two things, you'll be in good shape, and you can just look at it with them. They do theology in challenge 4, where they study the Old Testament the first semester, the New Testament the second semester. Their challenge 1, they study American government, and they rewrite the Founding Fathers documents. Another thing that's different about challenges, they start with American children's literature and end up with the ancient, and like the Aeneid and Iliad, and a lot of people do it backwards, so they'll start with the ancient and then move to the modern. But they do it this way because, of course, as you get older, it's easier to understand the more difficult things. So they start with children's literature, then they do short stories, then challenge 1 they do American literature, then British literature, then poetry and Shakespeare, and then ancient literature. So that's why they do that. Let me see. There's a place online, I believe, and you might want to look for this. It might also be in the catalog, where they talk about all the scholarships that challenge students get, how they do as far as staying in church and getting into colleges, and which colleges they've gotten into, and it's good stats. Really looks great. So this is they're practicing academic skills with quality content, but the most important goal is how will they use the content to glorify God. So it is a major focus, and all the presenting, all this stuff, we want them to be ready for whatever God has for their life. So that is what to know God and make Him known, where that all comes in, what that means. So I'm sure I forgot some stuff, but you always will, so that is one way I would do it. And you just have all your stuff, and this lasted 40 minutes, and they say give yourself 2 hours because you want to talk, and they'll have a lot of questions, so you'll go on rabbit trails, and that's okay too. Okay, well, I hope this is helpful, and if you want my notes, I'm sure I can find them. I have or copy them, and now they might make more sense. Okay, thanks, you guys.